You won't pay your college tuition. You don't deserve it, my parents said. After my twin sister and I got accepted into the same program at the same time. They were paying hers in full. I didn't give up. I went anyway. 2 years later, my parents went pale when they found out the truth. When the email came in, I screamed so loud I scared the dog. My hands were shaking as I opened it. One of those dumb things you do even though the subject line clearly says, "Congratulations, you've been accepted." I got in. I ran through the hallway like a maniac, almost tripping over the rug on the way to the kitchen, where my parents were having coffee. Camille was already there, scrolling her phone like she was waiting for something. I got in, I said, beaming. "Westbrook, the data science program." My mom blinked. "Oh," she said, barely looking up from her mug. "That's great." Then Camille chimed in with a perfectly timed ding from her phone. "Me too," she said, smug. "I just got the email." The room shifted. My mom jumped up like someone lit a fire under her. "You did? Oh my God, Camille, that's amazing. Westbrook is lucky to have you." She hugged her. Then Dad got up too, giving Camille this proud little side pat on the shoulder like she'd just won an Olympic medal. No one hugged me. I stood there holding my phone, still open to the acceptance letter, while they fawned over her like she was the only one who got in. "We both got accepted," I said. It came out smaller than I meant it to. Of course, Dad said, glancing at me, "But Camille was always the more natural fit for that program." I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He waved it off. "Nothing. Just, Camille's always been more focused." Focused. Camille who forgot she signed up for the SAT twice. Camille who only took calculus because I tutored her through it. I felt like the floor shifted under me, but it got worse. Much worse. Later that night, after dinner, I brought it up again. I wanted to talk about the logistics. Tuition, housing, next steps. Camille had already gotten her acceptance posted on every social media platform with 30 hashtags and a filter. I didn't even get a conversation. When I brought it up, my mom sighed like I was asking for something extravagant. "Jasmine, we need to be honest with you. We're not going to pay for your tuition." I blinked. "What?" "We've decided to use the college fund for Camille," Dad said, not even looking up from his laptop. I genuinely thought they were joking. "What do you mean for Camille? The fund was for both of us. We're twins." "It's not that simple," Mom said. "Camille's always been more consistent academically. She's shown real dedication." "And I haven't." My voice cracked. "You've always been creative," she said, which in our house was code for unreliable. "But college is a huge investment. We can't afford to take risks." It felt like being slapped with a smile on their faces. They weren't just picking Camille. They were telling me to my face that I wasn't worth investing in. "I earned this too," I said, my throat tightening. "We got into the same program, the same school. I worked just as hard." "You don't deserve it," Dad said flatly. "Not the way she does." And just like that, it was decided. Camille would be going to Westbrook, all expenses paid. And me, I was on my own. Camille didn't say anything. Not then. She didn't look at me, just kept scrolling through her phone, pretending not to hear. That night, I locked myself in my room and stared at the acceptance letter until the words blurred. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but it felt like crying would somehow confirm everything they believed about me, that I was too soft, too fragile, too unworthy. So instead, I opened a blank document and started researching scholarships, grants, student loans, anything. If they thought I was going to give up and just accept their verdict, they didn't know me at all. 2 years later, they would be standing at my door, ashen-faced. When I first moved into Aunt Mel's tiny apartment, all I brought with me were 2 duffel bags, a laptop that overheated if I opened more than 3 tabs, and a knot of something tight and ugly in my chest. My parents hadn't helped me pack. They didn't even say goodbye. They were too busy driving Camille to her brand new dorm, snapping photos for Facebook like she was some kind of princess heading off to her coronation. I got a text from Mom that day. It said, "Good luck. Make smart choices," that was it. Aunt Mel met me at the bus station with a hug and a grocery bag of snacks. "You can crash on the pullout," she said. "It's lumpy, but it's yours." That first night, lying on her creaky bed, with the smell of her neighbor's curry leaking through the walls, I just stared at the ceiling and thought, they really meant it. They're really not going to help me at all. But it wasn't the first time they'd made it clear who mattered more. Camille and I are twins, but only technically. We were born 43 minutes apart, and somehow I was always 43 steps behind. She got the Barbie dream house for Christmas. I got socks. She got extra dance classes, private tutors, a sweet 16 with a DJ and catering. I got told you're more independent. You don't need all that. When we both got accepted to Westbrook, Camille burst into tears of joy. I did too, but mine didn't last long. Because my tears turned bitter the second my parents looked me in the eye and said I didn't deserve it. Still, even then, I'd hoped, maybe once we started, once they saw me working hard, they'd come around. They didn't. Camille got a fully paid tuition package from the family fund, plus a generous monthly allowance for living expenses. I got a stack of paperwork and you'll figure it out. I applied for every scholarship I could find. Some came through. A few were tiny. $500 here, $1 there, but it added up. I qualified for subsidized loans too, which was a relief and a burden all at once. To make it work, I also had to take on 3 part-time jobs. Barista in the mornings, library assistant between classes, and weekend shifts at a call center for an internet provider. I wasn't sleeping much, but I was studying like my life depended on it, because it kind of did. Westbrook was BR-TAL. The data science program had a reputation for weeding people out early. I was surrounded by kids with MacBooks and parents who paid rent. I was coding on a borrowed Chromebook and crashing on a pull-out sofa. I barely saw Camille. We were in the same major, but she had a different friend group. Loud, polished kids with designer tote bags and endless free time. I'd see her sometimes across campus, laughing on the quad, carrying bubble tea, her hair curled just so. She never stopped to talk, and I didn't either. It was easier that way. I poured everything into my studies. I attended every lecture, sat in the front, met with professors during office hours, even when I didn't have questions. I needed them to know I was serious. Because unlike most of my classmates, I wasn't there to explore or find myself. I was there to survive. The second year hit harder. My scholarships didn't renew at the same rate. My loans increased. My back hurt constantly from sleeping on that awful pullout. Aunt Mel never complained. Not once. But I knew I was pushing the limits of her hospitality. So I tried something else. It started small, just a little freelance data cleanup for a grad student. Then someone else needed help scraping a data set. Then a local business wanted customer insights. I wasn't a business major. I didn't know the first thing about pricing or branding, but I knew how to work. I called it a side hustle at first, just something to help with groceries. But by spring, I had 3 recurring clients and a website. By summer, I was filing taxes as a sole proprietor. The extra income meant I could finally give Aunt Mel a little rent, which she promptly spent on a new futon for me because, as she said, if I'm letting her crash here, at least you shouldn't wake up shaped like a question mark. And then, finally, I found a studio apartment I could afford. Tiny, top floor, no elevator, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I sat on the floor eating noodles out of a paper cup and let myself breathe for the first time in what felt like 2 years. No handouts, no safety net, no parents hovering with conditions and strings, just me. Sometimes I still saw Camille on campus. Less often now. She wasn't in any of my classes anymore. I didn't know if she'd changed majors or was just taking electives. She always looked amazing. Perfect skin, designer bags, new outfits every week. But when we passed each other, she didn't even nod. She hadn't been to visit me, neither had our parents. Honestly, I thought they'd forgotten about me altogether. Until the knock. It was a Wednesday night. I just finished a late client call and was microwaving leftover stir-fry. When I opened the door, I froze. My parents were standing there. Mom in her tailored coat, Dad looking stiff and pale. Neither said anything at first. They just stared at me like they hadn't expected me to answer. Jasmine, Mom finally said, her voice tight, "We need to talk. It's about Camille." My stomach dropped. They hadn't come to apologize. They hadn't come because they'd finally recognized what I'd achieved. They'd come because something had gone wrong. And somehow, I already knew they were about to ask me for something I wasn't sure I could give. I didn't invite them in right away. I just stood there in the doorway of my tiny apartment, heart pounding, staring at my parents like they were ghosts. I hadn't seen them in almost 2 years. Not a single visit, not a phone call, not even a birthday text. And now here they were, pale and awkward in my hallway like strangers. Mom broke the silence first. "It's Camille," she said. "We haven't heard from her in over a week." I blinked. Okay. She hasn't answered texts or calls. Dad added. Her roommate says she's barely been home. We tried checking the university, but the school won't give us anything. You're the only one who might know something. I took a step back and crossed my arms. Why would I know anything? We haven't spoken since freshman year. Mom flinched. Still, you go to the same school. You must have some idea. She's not in any of my classes, I said flatly. We don't exactly run in the same circles. They glanced at each other, unsure, but I could tell that wasn't the full reason they'd come. What's this really about? I asked. That's when Dad sighed, reached into his coat and pulled out a folded letter. He handed it to me. Final notice. Past due, balance, leased property. 516 Glendale Avenue. Unit 4B outstanding balance. $4,732. Immediate payment required to avoid legal action. My eyes scanned the words twice, then again. I don't understand. She stopped paying rent, Mom said quietly. 3 months ago, my jaw tightened. I thought you were covering her rent. We were, Dad said, defensive now. We sent her money every month directly. You assumed she was paying, I finished for him. Mom's face was red now. Apparently she used it for, other things. Travel, clothes, a ski trip, I think. Of course she did. Of course, Camille took their money and used it to live like she was still the golden child in some high school fairy tale. And they'd never noticed. Never questioned it. Just kept wiring her money, like a broken vending machine spitting out snacks whether you push the button or not. She was always hanging out with those wealthy kids, Mom murmured, more to herself than to me. I guess she was trying to keep up. I stared at them. So now what? You think I know where she is? You might, Dad snapped. Or maybe you've heard something. I haven't, I said. We haven't spoken in a year. I'm not her babysitter. You could still help, Mom said. She's your sister, I laughed. Not out of humor. It just sort of escaped me. Bitter, dry sister, I said. You mean the one you chose over me? The one you paid for while I worked 3 jobs and slept on a couch for 2 years? That's not fair, Dad said sharply. No, I snapped. It's not. But it's true, Mom softened her voice. We're not asking you to cover her rent. Just help us find her. She might respond to you. She won't, I said. And even if she did, that's not my problem. There it was. The thing I hadn't dared to say for years. Not when I was 18 and sobbing in Aunt Mel's guest bathroom. Not when I was up at 3 a.m., proofreading data entries with blistered fingers and a migraine. It's not my problem. You've made your choices, I said. So did Camille, and I made mine. Dad stepped forward. Jasmine, we are your family. I stepped back. You stopped being mine the day you told me I didn't deserve the education you gave her for free. They both flinched at that. A direct hit. For a second, nobody said anything. The wind hissed through the hallway outside. My leftover rice steamed gently in the microwave behind me. Then Mom's expression hardened. You've changed. Yes, I said. I had to. Dad's jaw tightened. This isn't about the past. Your sister is in trouble. I folded the notice and handed it back. She can deal with it just like I did. You're being selfish, Mom hissed. No, I said. I'm finally being fair to myself. They didn't know what to say to that. For so long, I had twisted myself into knots trying to earn their approval. I had downplayed my hurt, buried my anger, and stayed small. Now they wanted something from me, and couldn't hide their disappointment that I wasn't the obedient daughter they remembered. You know, Dad said coldly, for someone who likes to talk about being abandoned, you're doing a good job of abandoning your own family. I didn't flinch. You're not my mom looked like she might cry. We didn't come here to fight. We just thought you thought I'd bail you out, I said. But I'm not your backup plan. I held the door open. Good luck finding Camille. They hesitated, Dad's mouth opening and closing like he still had something left to say. But whatever it was, he swallowed it. They left, but it was far from over. I didn't expect to see them again. Not after the way they walked out of my apartment. Not after I refused to clean up the mess Camille made. I figured I was done playing the villain in their story. But 2 months later, I was invited to speak at a youth entrepreneurship panel. Nothing huge, just a conference for students and early-stage founders. I almost turned it down. Public speaking still made me nervous, but my mentor insisted. What I didn't know was that a small business magazine had run a profile on me the week before. They'd heard about my company through one of my clients and wanted to do a piece on under -30 founders defying the odds. It had my name, a photo, a quote about how I built something out of nothing, and it landed on my parents' Facebook feed. So there I was, standing backstage in a blazer that cost more than my entire freshman wardrobe, when I glanced out into the crowd and saw them, third row, sitting together, stone-faced, like they'd wandered in by accident. I felt sick. I nearly walked out. But I didn't. I gave the speech. Not because I owed it to anyone, but because I owed it to myself. I talked about struggle, yes. About late nights and couch surfing and jobs that barely covered textbooks. But I also talked about what came after. Not the money, the agency, the fact that I got to decide who I was now. That was what mattered. When it ended, I escaped into the hallway to breathe. I'd barely made it 2 steps before I heard my mother's voice. Jasmine. I turned slowly. They were both there. My mom is holding her bag like a shield. My dad with that tight, practiced smile that meant he wanted something. That was a very impressive presentation, he said. I said nothing. We saw the article, Mom added. Surprised us. Clearly, I said. She hesitated. Camille's not doing well. That got my attention. She's fallen behind in her program, failed a few courses, and now she's saying she wants to switch majors entirely, which means starting over. She's also behind on rent, Dad added. You were right. She wasn't using the money we sent for housing. She's been living well beyond her means, so I kept my face neutral. I'd warned them. They didn't want to hear it then. We took out another loan to cover the gap, Mom said quietly. But things are tight now. We're behind on the mortgage. We never imagined things would go this way. And I asked. They exchanged a look. We're asking for help, Dad said finally, just until things stabilize. I blinked. You're serious. You're doing well now, my mother said. And we're not asking for much. Just enough to cover Camille's tuition going forward. And maybe help with the house until we figure things out. I actually laughed. I didn't mean to. It just came out. You're asking me, I said, to pay for the degree you wouldn't let me pursue for the daughter you chose over me. That's not fair, Dad snapped. We did what we thought was right. No, I said, my voice steady. You did what was easy. You picked the one who smiled at the dinner table and wore the clothes you liked and made you feel good about yourselves. And now that she's not who you thought she'd be, you come crawling back to the one you cast out. Mom's expression flickered. Hurt maybe, but not enough. We're your parents, she said quietly. We're your family. No, I said, you were Camille's family. I was just there. Dad's tone sharpened. You think you're better than us now, because you made some money. No, I said again. I think I finally see things clearly. They left not long after that. There was no big argument, no slammed doors, just a quiet, defeated retreat, and I let them go. A week later, I found out they'd started telling people I was ungrateful. That I'd turned on the family and refused to help when they needed it most. Someone even forwarded me a Facebook post my mother had written, vague but pointed, about certain children who forget where they came from. I didn't respond, not publicly, not at first. But then the article got reprinted, a bigger publication this time. It included a line from my speech, the one about building without a safety net, and people started messaging me, not trolls, strangers, kids who said they saw me. In me, kids with estranged families, people trying to build something from nothing. So I told my story, not as a clapback, not to get even, just to tell the truth. I wrote a short post, shared one photo, me in my cap and gown, standing alone outside the university building where I never walked a graduation stage. I was accepted into a top program alongside my twin sister. My parents paid for her tuition in full and told me I didn't deserve mine. I worked 3 jobs, crashed on a relative's couch, and eventually dropped out to build a business from scratch. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. And now that I'm standing, I'm building ladders for others, not bridges for those who watch me drown. It went viral. And just like that, the narrative shifted. Again, not long after, I donated part of my earnings to a scholarship fund. One specifically for first-gen students, or those cut off from family support. I didn't name it after myself. I didn't need to. A few weeks later, I heard from a distant cousin. Your parents lost the house. She texted. Camille moved in with a friend. She's working retail, not talking to them much anymore. I stared at the message for a long time. And then I turned off my phone. I never finished college. Neither did Camille. But there's a difference. She dropped out because she couldn't keep up. I dropped out because I'd already outrun the life they told me I didn't deserve. And I never looked back.